Nick Heller, and I'm from Agriculture Victoria, based here at Stura. So with these Beyond Soil Care projects, I work mainly on that. When groups like Landcare Network or Fraser get some money to run a trial, they get me as well. So I try and come out and do some measurements and try and bring, a little bit more science into the way things are done and try to help out. So big thanks to Fraser for having me involved, and I think it's fantastic what he's doing here. He's really sort of pushing the envelope and trying different things. But I think a couple of really important things with Fraser is that his knowledge is fantastic. He doesn't just, he's got really in-depth knowledge and does a lot of research about everything he does. And the other thing is I think he's very pragmatic, so prepared to say that in work and not tied to any ideology. So doing things when they're required and trying to minimise things he doesn't like in the system, I think. But and happy for people coming up and look at what he's doing, obviously, so that's really good. I'll just go through some pretty basic economics for the trial. So for Fraser, there was two main outcomes that he was looking for, I guess. The first was, does growing a mixed species cover crop improve sort of alpha, does that have benefits for the maize yield? But the other side of it was, can you make that mixed species cover crop economic in its own right? There's been a lot of work showing that cover crops are good, but they're usually a time when we're not making money, so trying to make them pay for themselves is important. So to do that, what we wanted to compare it to was the oat crop, the hay crop that Fraser normally grows. So we obviously had that growing, and we get a pretty basic gross return on that. So this yielded around about 10 tonnes per hectare. And we just multiplied his sold that standing, so there's no cost associated with making that hay. Sold it for $90 a tonne, and so it was a gross margin of around $900. Not a gross margin, a gross return of about $900 a hectare. So that's sort of our benchmark, is hoping that the mixed species crop will end up around that same point. With trying to work out what sort of return he's getting from the mixed species crop, we have the average number of cattle on the trial, 83 over the period, and they were on the trial for 32 days. Now that crop was actually there for 90 plus days. They weren't on the trial itself the whole time. Most of the time when they weren't on the trial, they were in a paddock with basically pretty low quality cereal hay. The weights of those cattle were only measured at the start and the end of the experiment day. So we had a bit of a challenge to work out how much of that weight gain to attribute to in the cattle to attribute to the trial, and how much to when they were off the trial.
Yeah,
so
I'm to blame for that, because I should have weighed them sooner, but it was just harvest time and it just didn't take priority. So, but it would have been nice to know exactly what they put on in there. But I think people who are familiar with cattle will look at local grazing and should be able to form their own views, I would have thought, on what sort of gains they could get themselves on it.
Yeah. So we ran two scenarios. The first was a worst case scenario where we assumed the weight gain over that 90 days was equal when they were out of the paddock and when they were in the paddock. So we ended up with about a kilo a day growth rate for those cattle. Then we did a best case scenario where we attributed all the weight gain to when they're on the trial and none to when they're off the trial. So the reality is probably somewhere in between. We'll never know. But so we multiplied the average number of cattle by the number of days on the trial, by the weight gain, by a cattle price in dollars per kilo to get a gross return. And the important thing here is basically that the worst case scenario came out at a similar number, around about that $900 a hectare to the hay crop. So I think that was pretty potent for Fraser.
Yeah, that was certainly one of the questions I was looking to get answered, so it was good to see that. Yeah, and it turned out how I'd hoped. So
best case scenario, $1,400, almost $1,500 a hectare is well above what the hay crop returned. So it's a pretty basic analysis. We haven't taken into account other things that might have changed in terms of costs, and with the cattle obviously there's buying costs. there's transport costs, there's selling costs.
Can I just want to make a point that I don't know whether the gross return could be much better for a hay crop than that, but I reckon, like from what I was saying in my presentation, that the gross return for the cattle could have been a hell of a lot better if they've got some of the grazing done a bit better and got the crop in earlier. Like it could have been a lot more growth.
Yeah, I was going to point that out. And the other thing that you said was that your priority was also the corn crop, the subsequent corn crop, so that cover crop was terminated fairly early to accommodate the corn crop. But it could have progressed for a lot longer with that ryegrass there and actually got a lot more production off it for those cattle. So if the focus wasn't on the corn crop, that might be much better. But yeah, so initially anyway, it looks like, yeah, with the grazing. Oh, the other thing I've got in there is what beef price was required to break even, and he actually, on the worst case scenario, he needed a little bit better beef price, but on the best case scenario, and that growth rate, 1.6 kilograms per day isn't unreasonable. That's still a pretty reasonable growth rate. Cattle price can drop quite significantly and still get good returns for that system. No other questions about that? So I was just going to go on and just have a look at the soil tests that we've got themselves. They're a couple of points in time, and it's a little bit hard at this stage to draw much from them, but I'm just going to talk a bit about what we saw and what benefits we might expect to see, and just bring in some research that sort of helps support that. So we've got here, I wouldn't call this a definitive list, but a list of some of the benefits or some of the reasons people might be growing cover crops. So it's around building organic matter and the benefits that has for building soil structure and stabilising soil structure. And erosion protection. We've obviously got the nitrogen fixation, if we've got legumes in there. We've got water and nutrient management benefits. So I think that's really in terms of as an alternative to a fallow, where we've got build up of water and nutrient, which is a good thing. That's why we do fallows, but there's also risks of loss and particularly of nutrients. So the mixed species cover crops a way of sort of accumulating them and making them available for the subsequent crop. Weed suppression again compared to a fallow. And then we've got pest and disease benefits both within the mixed species crop, but also for the subsequent crop. So it can create a break crop, but there's sort of two mechanisms that are sort of talked about in terms of reducing disease and pest pressures in the mixed species crop, and that's really, the first is around harbouring those natural enemies. So there's environment there that harbours the natural enemies to the pathogens, and the second one's around the pathogens might be there, but there's just a reduced concentration of the plants or resources they're looking for. They're more likely to bump into a plant that they're not interested in, and therefore they don't get that opportunity to develop into a full-blown disease. And the other obvious reason we're doing this is stimulating that soil biology, and that's what drives a lot of these benefits that we're actually talking about in terms of improved soil health. So we've got some other considerations, and I think Graham and Colin and Fraser are a better place to talk about some of these, but with mixed species, we're looking for, when we're selecting the species we're after, we're looking for complementary species, not competition between the species. So I think one area that is to do with the grazing of crops and the succession. So you have some species that will come on early, you graze them off, and then species that come on after. So thinking about how those species are going to actually complement one another and not be competing for resources, so sunlight. But as I said, there's other people who are better placed to talk about how different plants achieve that, or what we should be looking at there. There's trade-offs, so legumes, they fix nitrogen for us, but they tend to grow less biomass. Cereals will grow more biomass, but the quality is not as good of the residues that are returned. So, and the other big thing is that agronomy is still essential. So getting all those little things right. You look at a lot of trials and experiments. and paddocks where people have tried mixed species cover crops and just sometimes very basically going into what lets this system down as opposed to and then you don't get the benefits from the cover crops themselves. And then there's, potential drawbacks that you've got to consider as well. If storing moisture for your subsequent crops is important for growing the cash crop, they're going to use water that you'd be otherwise storing. There's timeliness and complexity with particularly fitting the livestock in. Weed control with mixed species can be more difficult, and that green bridge, so potentially carrying over diseases for the next crop. But there are things you need to consider, and there's ways of managing those issues. So I was sort of really going to focus on these top few benefits really out of phrases of building organic matter and how that improves soil quality. So done an estimate of dry matter or organic matter inputs into these two systems. So for the hay crop, that was pretty simple. Most of the above ground biomass is taken away in the hay, but about 10% of it tends to get left behind. So we're looking at about a 1 tonne input of plant dry matter above ground. So there's roots going into the soil as well, but above ground we're looking at about a tonne of dry matter going into that soil. For the mixed species crop, we've estimated that we produced on average about 10 tonnes of dry matter, so that would have varied depending on when the crop was, what stage the crop was growing at, and so different parts might look like different house. So of that 10 tonnes of biomatter that we think we produced, we worked out that about 4 tonnes of it was consumed. So they've consumed about 40% of that dry matter, of which about a tonne would have been excreted back out onto the paddock. Important thing with that is it's good stuff, full of nitrogen, but it's not spread evenly over the paddock obviously. Usually ends up at about 10%, 10 to 20% of the paddock covered. We're talking rates of equivalent nitrogen rates of 600 to 1,000 kilos per hectare. So they're not great at spreading that back out, and we get a lot of losses, particularly of nitrogen, that organic matter does end up back in the system. So of the crop residue, about 6 tonnes of that was left behind on the soil surface. So the total amount of crop residue or dry matter or organic matter that's going back in for that system is about 7 tonnes, so about 70%, which is a pretty reasonable estimate. So much higher, a lot more organic matter going into that system than where the crop is cut for hay. So why do we care about the amount of organic matter going into the system? It's pretty much that's the key driver of our soil carbon levels or our soil organic matter levels. We're interested in, most of you will be interested in soil organic matter. We don't measure organic matter, we measure carbon. So sometimes we talk about soil organic carbon, that's what we measure, but we're interested in how much organic matter ends up in that soil. So it's the amount of plant residues that go in there, so that and organic material that ends up going back onto the soil that we're interested in. So that's affected by the types of crops we grow, what rotations we grow, organic matter inputs and climate, so that affects how much biomass we can grow. Unfortunately or fortunately, most of that, once it gets into the soil, is broken down and releases CO2 again, so 80 to 90% in the first year. Shouldn't be seen as a bad thing, and that turnover of organic matter is absolutely essential. That's the organic matter is providing the carbon source, the nutrients and the energy for the soil microbes, and they're building a structure, suppressing diseases, doing a nutrient transformation for us. So that's good and bad. We want that to happen, and that's basically determined by our soil type will govern that to some extent in our climate. So wet, moist, warm climates will see that turn over more quickly, and soils, so clay soils tend to form structure around that organic matter and protect it from decomposition, so you can build up soil organic matter levels a bit more in clay soils. And the other big one is tillage. If we till the soil, we break up the structure, we add our soil microbes able to access more of that organic matter and consume it. So that's why we want to keep tillage to a minimum. Thoughtful tillage, I think, is a good term. I won't go too far into this, but there's been a lot of work around that shows a pretty good correlation between the amount of plant material that goes back into a system and soil organic carbon levels, which is our measure of soil organic matter. This is work that we did at Tatura, showed that basically if you can add an extra tonne of, for every extra tonne of organic matter, plant material you can add over a 10-year period, your soil carbon levels will be about 0.3% higher in the top 10 centimetres. With a few outliers in this, few paddocks that we measured that were different and their pastures. We think our estimate of the amount of plant material that went in probably wasn't quite right. It's hard to, we haven't got yields, so it's hard to estimate how much more organic matter is going in.
So that's basically 10 tonnes, right? In that example, it's over 10 years.
Yeah, so if you can put 10 tonnes extra over 10 years, you'll increase your soil carbon levels by about 0.3%.
In 1 year, what would happen?
A lot of it will get burnt off, and you won't get that same. I mean, you've potentially got issues with C to N ratio, so it not breaking down. That's what we see with maize crops. That's
Is that with or without livestock?
Mainly without livestock. Yeah. As I said, one of the big ways, we can't change our climate, we can't change our soil type, but yeah, it's the types of crops we grow and the way we manage those crops has a big impact on that organic matter being returned to the system, as we've seen with Grazing Australia. I won't go into this, we've got a calculator that just enables you to put in different rotations, and it'll give you an estimate, and crop residue management practices, and it'll give you an estimate of how much plant material is going back into that system, including your roots. So for this trial, these are the organic matter levels, so it's the way this is being measured, it's actually organic matter measured in the soil. At the start of, was that before the crop went in? Yeah. So they're essentially exactly the same paddock, organic matter measured at the same time, and we can see some differences there. And then this was taken after that mixed species cover crop. There's been some change. Without a few more years of this sort of data, I wouldn't want to put that down. There'd be natural variability. Don't know, but there's some differences there. Perhaps the mixed species is doing a better job, but it could be that variability. So just having a look at why we want to increase soil organic matter, and out of that same work we did, we've found, and a lot of people have found very similar correlations between soil organic carbon levels on the bottom here and soil structural stability. So that's water stable aggregates, that's how stable the soil is when it gets wet. And what this basically shows us is that for the soils in this region, when they reach about 2% organic carbon, soil structural stability is maximised. So it's a good target for us when we're trying to work out what's the soil carbon level to reach. Above that, yeah, if you get soil carbon levels higher than that, we're building resilience, so we can till the soil, or we can, reduce the amount of organic matter going into that soil for a period of time without compromising the soil structure, which is a key component of soil health. Great piece of work here from new scientists in the area, Andrew and myself did this this year, where we went out to a number of paddocks in the area and measured bulk density, which is a measure of essentially how much air space there is in the soil, in paddocks that had been compacted by livestock and paddocks that hadn't had that history of livestock on them. And what we found, and this is another common finding, is there's a good relationship between soil organic carbon levels, which we've got on the bottom here, and bulk density, so how much airspace we've got in our soil. So as soil organic carbon levels increase, structure improves, we end up with more airspaces in the soil, and that's good for a range of reasons. What we also found there, which was really interesting, and what we wanted to see, was that the paddocks that were, the red dots here, are the paddocks that were trafficked. So the ones with higher soil organic carbon levels, there was definitely some compaction, but it was reduced where we had that higher organic carbon levels. So that organic matter is able to hold that structure together and resist being broken down, but also also, there's the types of things you were talking about, the organic matter protecting the surface and sort of creating a protective surface over that soil.
When did bulk density start becoming an issue?
Usually around about 1.6 for clay soils. And we do find most of the clay soils around here are above that and get pretty good. So these are the bulk density measurements from the trial out here. So the hay crop in orange and the mixed species in green. So we've got the topsoil, the change from before the crop went in and at the end of the crop. We can see both of them in the subsoil, fairly high bulk densities, which isn't unusual in this area, but that is something that a lot of us are looking at how we can manage that and improve it, because it's restricting the amount of air that's down there, it's restricting root growth. It's something that I think we can make gains in. Both of them, the bulk density increased from the start of that trial to the end of the crop, and we'd expect that because it was all freshly tilled. We've fluffed up the soil, and it's going to consolidate to some extent. We can't stop that. Once again, and the subsoil has decreased slightly. That may be because of some root growth, but maybe it's just sort of a bit of seasonal variability. Once again, the changes that we're seeing, the differences between treatments, I wouldn't attribute to the treatments necessarily yet. Keeping on that. Quickly, this is soil strength, so we measure it by pushing a penetrometer into the soil. A rod, a steel rod, and it measures how hard it is to push it in the soil. This is done at this site in the green and blue when the soil is moist, so that's when the soil is softest. And we've also got a pivot soil in yellow and a flood irrigated soil in red. So what we see is not much of a difference in soil strength between the multi-species and the hay. The sort of variability we're seeing here isn't that significant. Well, I think the interesting one is that the dotted line here is the multi-species soil strength after it had been pugged, and that's actually in the pug marks. So that pugging hasn't made it harder when it's wet, and it hasn't caused compassionate depth necessarily, but I think I still would encourage pugging, because what we'll tend to see is that pugging just destroys the soil structure, just smears it, and that'll go very, very hard when it's wet, and we'll see, when it's dry, and we'll see some of that out here today. So when soil's wet, it's hard to see differences between them, because most soils get softer when they're wet, but as the way they dry out.
Did you do any soil pits to look at root growth? Like, with the vetch and oats, I assume they'll have bulk of their roots at a certain depth, and then with the multi-species, with the spring canola and fodder beet, they're probably going to push down deeper, which might be what you're seeing there a bit.
I reckon that might be a good idea if we can keep this trial going, to do it maybe at the end of the next multi-species crop we see, I reckon. Give it a bit more time for the soil to settle down.
Yeah.
Nick, just wondering, what distance from the drip tape did you do those measurements? Like how far out?
Far enough that didn't get a free Fraser. Just off centre.
Okay.
So yeah, probably within 6 inches.
Okay.
Yeah. Just affected Roundup on the soil microbiology. Is there any?
We had a guy that's been some work done in this area recently out in New South Wales, and he had him speak at some of our days here last year, and they're seeing build-up. They are seeing build-ups of it in some soils, but they're seeing no adverse effects on any of the biological function. They found increases in some biological responses because it's a substrate for it's a carbon source and phosphorus source for organic for soil biology. But yeah, no, it's an area they're still looking into, but no adverse effects. Not something you look into here. Oh yeah, and the big thing here is one of the biggest impacts on soil structure in this area is the flood irrigation, and so that's why I included this paddock here, the flood irrigated paddock. Flood irrigation is very hard on soil structure. Rapid wetting breaks down soil structure and flushes sodium and other basic metals down into the soil profile, and we get that severe hard pan. And that's wet soil as well, so that's just shows basically that there's not much of a hard pan and the benefit of that drip and sprinkle irrigation systems for soil structure. A lot of people are interested in this sort of system and increasing soil carbon and increasing soil volume to increase the amount of water that's available to plants. I'll quickly do a demonstration just to show what I'm talking about. So, soil's full of pores, air pockets, much like this sponge. When it's saturated, all of the spaces are filled. So that's called saturation. So that's the most water it can hold. Most of that a lot of that water is not available because it just drips out of the water under gravity. So it'll drip out. That's not considered available to plants. Plants will start using the water and they apply a pressure essentially to get water out, and they'll use water in the biggest pores first because it's easiest to get, and they'll slowly work harder and harder to get water. The bit that I squeezed out easily there is what we call readily available water, so plants don't have to work hard for that. It doesn't cost them much energy, and if we're irrigating, we want to keep that range of water in here. We want to be re-irrigating at this point. There's still water in here and plants can still access it, but they're having to work harder and harder to get it. So that's our plant available water. They can't get any more water out of this soil now, and they're going to die if there's no rain. There's still water in here, but it's just plants have to work too hard to get it. So it's that for irrigation systems, it's that readily available water that we're interested in. For the dryland systems, it's a plant available water that we're interested in. Now, a lot of research has shown that basically, if we increase soil organic carbon levels by 1%, we get about 1 extra millimetre of available water in the soil. And the ranges are from 0 to no extra water in the soil, and this is the plant available range, up to about 2 millimetres of extra water. So to put that in context, if we increase soil organic carbon levels by 1% over a metre, we'd have about 12 extra millimetres of water. And this time of the year, if we've got a crop out there, it's using 7 to 10 millimetres a day. So it's not a lot of extra water, and that scenario is not very likely. What's more likely, maybe if we increase soil carbon levels in the top 20 centimetres of soil by 1%, and below that by maybe a fifth of that, so 0.2%, which gives us about an extra 3 millimetres of water in the soil that the soil is actually able to store. And once again, we've still got that 7 to 10 mils of daily water use in summer. So the opportunities to increase the amount of water we can store in the soil through these mechanisms are pretty limited. On sandy soils, we get a better response. Sometimes what we find quite often is there's actually a lot of extra water stored below that plant available range. There's a lot of smaller pores that are created, but also quite often there's quite large pores created. So they're the ones that drain under gravity. And it's actually those that are giving us a lot of the benefit that we see when we increase soil carbon levels. So they increase infiltration rates. So first of all, we've got higher soil carbon levels, we've got better soil structural stability. It doesn't break down when it gets wet. We don't get crust. Doesn't break down when we traffic it. So then water can get into the soil more easily. In a dryland system, it can get down deeper into the soil where we're less likely to use it. With that more soil organic matter, we've got more porous soil, so it's easier for the roots to grow through and explore and extract that water. There's not necessarily more water available there, but the water that we do get, we conserve it better and we get it into the soil better, we get less losses in evaporation and runoff. So definitely benefits, but quite often here we talk about these benefits in terms of water storage and soil. So key findings out of this, basically out of this trial, we've seen some changes in physical and chemical soil properties. I'd say it's too early to really draw any conclusions there. Early signs are that the maize is looking better on the mixed species side, and hope that continues. The grazing system has definitely put more crop residue into the soil, and we think that that's where the benefit's going to come from, or a big part of the benefit. For both the next crop and ongoing soil health, and the fact that mixed species crop with the grazing is making a good return is I think very good for the system. So I'll leave it at that.